at gunpoint. It's a terrifying experience. Most people say you shouldn't resist, that you should give the robber whatever they want. Sounds like pretty good advice. But what if you could turn the tables on the robber? Would you? Well, tonight I'm going to introduce you to a young man who did just that, and then had the tables turned on him. Convenience stores are robbed an average of 71 times each day across America. While that's an improvement over a few years ago, it still can be a traumatic and even deadly experience for a clerk.
You gotta hold your feet up.
So meet ex-clerk Antonio Feliciano, 27 years old, married and the father of 3-year-old Nereida and 2-year-old Ariana. He makes his home here in Martinsburg, West Virginia. At nights, till recently, he worked the graveyard shift for 7-Eleven until a split-second decision changed his life. So this is where you used to work, huh?
Yeah, this was the 7-Eleven I was working at that night.
And you say it was fairly uneventful.
It was, except for the robbery, I mean, it was dead.
It was 4 in the morning. He and another clerk were on duty. When did you notice something was wrong?
When she came in the door wielding a gun.
Armed with a sawed-off rifle, a woman later identified as Glenda Renee Hull had come to rob the store.
She said, get behind the counter, give me the money, or I'm gonna blow your heads off. I had to grab a 7-Eleven bag, open up the register. We put the money in there, the food stamps, gave her the bag. At this point, she's screaming and yelling and cursing. I was like, okay, this is going down very bad. She has the money. She's not leaving.
Then, he says, Glenda Hull cocked the hammer on the rifle.
As soon as I heard that click, the fear tripled. You know, it was like, I'm not going home. I'm not seeing my children ever again. Even now, to think about it, it brings back a lot of emotions.
So Antonio made a move, a risky one.
I grabbed the gun, pulled it over around her shoulder and jerked it down out of her hand.
He wrestled the gun away from her, then found himself in a knockdown, drag-out fight. Hull fought hard, even bit him.
That's the scar right there.
Meanwhile, the other clerk called 911. So this is where it all went down. Hull was taken off to jail, and Feliciano went to the hospital to treat his wound. 2 hours later, he talked with his boss. But rather than thanking him, Margaret Mock was upset.
I thought he was crazy. I definitely thought he was crazy.
She felt Antonio had clearly violated a company policy not to resist an armed robber.
They want you to just do as the robber says, just step back from the register, and just give them anything they ask for. I mean, he put a lot of people's life at risk.
Mock, in fact, says some 7-Eleven employees refused to work with Antonio because of just that.
He just acted carelessly.
Did you know the policy about robbery when you went into the job?
Yes, I did know the policy. I followed the policy. It wasn't till she took it a step further that I took it a step further.
But the company didn't see it that way. 7-Eleven says it's all right for a clerk to resist only if they're attacked.
I see that. They're all in a line.
Antonio was put on paid administrative leave for 2 weeks. Then he was fired. To top things off, the police told him the gun hadn't even been loaded.
I got fired. My family is struggling now. And all this because a woman came in 7-Eleven with a gun.
Antonio's plight struck a chord of outrage that a clerk who successfully foiled a robbery had actually gotten fired because of it.
Some people might call our next guest a hero, but he was fired.
News quickly got out.
They fire you. They fire you for being a hero.
Soon, Antonio was being interviewed in the press, on TV and radio.
They didn't give you a pay increase. They didn't even give you your own 7-Eleven franchise. They fired you? We got to help this guy, ladies and gentlemen. This is an absolute outrage.
So Antonio's become a kind of celebrity. He's even been getting fan mail addressed to him as
Mr. Antonio Feliciano, the 7-Eleven robbery attempt hero. There's $20 in it.
And there's a note. But meanwhile, 7-Eleven has remained firm in its position, saying, quote, no asset in a 7-Eleven store is worth defending with an employee's life.
It was nothing to do about 7-Eleven's property. She could have had the cash register, taken a sandwich and a Coke to go, for all I cared. I gave her the money. All I wanted her to do was leave.
Antonio has now filed a lawsuit against 7-Eleven, asking for $100,000 for the emotional distress he says was caused by his termination. So why would a company fire someone for resisting a robber? And just what does 7-Eleven base its policy on? They cite a study that found victims who resist a robbery are far more likely to be killed than those who cooperate. Berkeley law professor Franklin Zimring is the author of that study.
To say no, or to stand on your rights, or to stand up to people with loaded guns, it's just not a good way to stay alive.
Zimring believes 7-Eleven's non-resistance policy makes sense. So does OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, as does the National Association of Convenience Stores, which made this film for convenience store employees.
Give the robber what he wants, whether it's money or merchandise, and do what you're told.
And yet, surprisingly, one study commissioned by the convenience store industry itself indicates that not resisting is far from a guarantee of safety. The industry study found that 8 out of 10 convenience store homicides occurred despite the fact that there was no resistance. Just listen to what happened to this clerk.
2 robbers came into the store, pretended that they wanted to buy something. Came into the counter, pulled a gun, pointed right in my face, and demanded the money.
Give it up now! Give it up! Fill it back!
I gave him the money. That wasn't enough.
That's all you got!
He looked at me and just shot me.
Former San Francisco convenience store clerk Nasser Massis miraculously survived a bullet wound that severed a major artery. Did you resist?
None whatsoever.
You cooperated?
Cooperated, gave them everything they asked for.
Why did they shoot you?
I wish I knew the answer. I don't know.
Bob Rees wishes he knew the answer to why his son Shane, only 19 years old, was murdered during a robbery at this 7-Eleven in Kansas City. Did he resist at all?
No. He opened the register. He handed him the money. He raised his hands and backed away from the register. The boy who robbed him grabbed his shirt and just shot him once, right down through the chest, pierced his heart.
You've seen the video?
I saw it once. That's one of the few things in my life that haunt me.
I asked them what they thought of Antonio's case.
I would probably do, or attempt to do, something very similar.
If I feel that I'm in danger, and I'm about to have someone do harm to me, I absolutely gotta defend myself.
7-Eleven fired him because they have a no resistance policy.
There's company policies. You have to live by those. I mean, we all do. But there's no policies or procedures telling me about not defending myself.
And in fact, some clerks do defend themselves. Sometimes the clerk doesn't even need his own weapon. In this Las Vegas robbery, the robber actually left the gun on the counter.
Now!
Here in St. Louis, the clerk, after being terrorized by this robber, somehow also manages to get the gun. But this kind of behavior can be risky. You don't always get the gun away. And even Nasser Massis admits.
Normally, nothing would happen if you cooperate.
You still believe that?
I still don't believe in that. I have to believe in that.
Well, give me some.
And that belief is well-founded. The vast majority of convenience store robberies don't involve homicides. The chances of a clerk getting killed are about 300 to 1. But even Professor Zimring, who 7-Eleven referred us to, says in Antonio's case, you can't argue with success.
If I were the management of the 7-Eleven company, I would have done 2 things. One is I would have enforced the rule, give him a desk job. But the other thing I think I'd do is take him out to dinner.
But before you decide Antonio is a hero, meet Moon Warren.
He made it longer than it had to be. He made it longer and more traumatic than it had to be.
Moon was the other 7-Eleven clerk at the store that night.
When he put his hands on that gun, it was pointed at me.
During the struggle?
Yes.
She could have been injured or even killed.
That's true. And that's something that I've thought about 100 times. But what they didn't say is that when I grabbed the gun, the way I grabbed it, my middle finger went right between the hammer and the gun itself. So when it clicked, it hit my finger. I mean, she wasn't in danger.
It's not the way I would have reacted.
Do you think it was unfair that he was fired?
No. He made that choice.
If he hadn't acted, it could have been a bad result as well.
It could have. And that's why I can't make a judgment call.
How would you have felt had she been killed during that struggle?
You can't even gauge. How do you gauge the loss of a friend, the sorrow that you would feel, the guilt? But it didn't happen that way.
Would you do the same thing again?
It all depends. I mean, how can you know how you're going to react in a life or death situation? How can you predict?